Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
I left alone. My mind was blank.
In Canadian and American newspapers of late. The reason for the interest is that the beast number might not be 666. A few years ago, a papyrus of the Book of Revelation was discovered. This manuscript has been given the designation P115 by the Institute for New Testament Textual Research in Münster, Germany. It was badly damaged, having only about 20 fragments that spanned 9 chapters. One fragment in particular is of interest. About the size of a postage stamp, it includes part of Revelation chapter 13, verse 18. There we read, "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the beast number, for it is man's number, and his number is 666. But the papyrus known as P115 has a different number here, 616. I saw the fragment in 2003 at the Ashmolean Museum of Oxford University, where it is housed. It was published over 6 years ago. Just now it is making its way into popular literature. When I looked at the fragment, the curator had to slice open its case because the verse in question was on the back side, which was covered by a sheet of paper. I looked at the fragment under a microscope to make sure that the wording had not been tampered with. But even with the naked eye, it was quite legible. Although this is the earliest fragment for this portion of Revelation, it's from about the 3rd or 4th century, the fragment's textual affinities and general reliability have yet to be examined fully.
666 is known as the devil's number, or the number of the beast. Some people think it's a particularly unlucky or evil number, but where does it come from and what does it really mean? 666 originates from the Book of Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, and for those of you who have read it, you know it's a pretty crazy book. It's basically the recounting of a bunch of visions by a guy who calls himself John. It includes everything from a dragon to a star falling out of the sky and turning the entire ocean to poison, valleys filling with the blood of slain people, you know, pretty apocalyptic stuff. The number 666 comes in chapter 13, verses 17 to 18. In this chapter, John has a vision of a multi-headed beast rising out of the ocean. The beast has great power. It enslaves the people of earth, it kills the saints, it forces people to blaspheme God, and it forces people to put the mark of the beast on the right hand and on the forehead. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Notice here that John's not talking about Satan and he's not talking about a demon. He's talking about something that he calls a beast and a man. So who is it? Scholars generally agree that the Book of Revelation is an extended polemic against the Roman Empire. In chapter 13, the beast is meant to represent the Roman Empire itself, an evil institution that enslaves the world. The heads of the beast are therefore interpreted to be the Roman emperors. 666 is thought to be a secret code for the evilest emperor of them all, Nero. Let's take Nero's Greek name, Neron Caesar, attested here on a bunch of Nero's Greek coins. And let's spell it in Hebrew letters. Both Greeks and Jews in the 1st century believed that every single letter had a corresponding number. Add the values of those letters together and you get 666.
I've come to the Biblioteca Castelnatense, near the Vatican, to meet an expert in early Christianity, Hanes Ison. She tells me she has compelling evidence that reveals the identity of the beast. Good morning. So, what exactly do we have here?
Well, I've been looking at some fragments of the Book of Revelation.
The Book of Revelation.
That's right.
The book of the end of days.
The end of days, the apocalypse. It's a prophetic book. It's got loads of symbolism, but it's also very much a political book and making a political claim about the cause of evil
the cause of evil.
Or who's responsible for evil.
So tell me about this coding, because as I understand it, the Antichrist was given a code, so they would never call his name. They would just say it by the code.
Well, there has been a lot of debate about what this number, in particular 666, who it refers to. There has also been a strong argument made for 666 referring to Nero.
Nero was emperor of Rome from 54 to 68 AD, around the time when the first Christians began to arrive in Rome. So how do you make 666 translate to Nero?
When you apply numerical values to the name Kaiser Neron and you add up those numbers, you come to 666.
In ancient Greek and Hebrew, every letter had a corresponding number. If you add up the letters of the name for Emperor Nero, written in Hebrew, Kaiser Neron, the total comes to 666.
As Jews were fascinated with symbolic numbers, and there were a variety of numbers that were symbolic numbers. The number 3, the number 7 was the number of perfection, the number 10, the number 12, multiples of 12, like 144,000. Gematria is not only the use of symbolic numbers, but it's when you are actually assigning a numerical value to letters of the Hebrew or the Greek alphabet, okay? So let's deal with that famous number 666 in the book of Revelation, though we have some variant texts that have it as 616. I'll explain that in a minute. The way that Gematria works is that you've assigned a numerical value to each of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, okay? And so let's take a name like the name David. You would add up the numerical value of D and then of the equivalent of the letter V and then again of D, and that would be the number of David. The name David would have a certain numerical value based on the numbers you've assigned to the alphabet. Well, that's what we're actually dealing with when we're dealing with 666. And here's the most interesting part. There were plenty of coins minted by the Roman emperor in the 1st century AD that had the following inscription, which said things like Neron Kaiser Divi Filii Augusti. And what that means is Nero Caesar, the son of the divine Augustus. Now, if you were to add up the numerical value of that particular inscription in Latin, you would come up with the number 666. So who's Mr. 666? Well, according to the author of Revelation, he's a Nero-like figure, whether it's Nero in particular or he's just the symbol for the persecutor of Christians, the antichrist figure who persecutes Christians or not. But here's the other interesting bit. The other inscription you might have in the eastern part of the empire would read Nero Kaiser Divi Filii Augusti. In other words, there would be the letter, what we would call the letter N, that's not there. Well, if you add up the numerical value of that, that's 616. Okay, that's where the textual variants come from the eastern end of the empire. So either way, whether it's 666 or 616, the numerical value of this adds up to a name, and the name it adds up to is the name of Nero, the emperor of the Roman Empire in the 60s, who was the first famous persecutor of the church. When Christians thought of an anti-Christian figure, they thought of Nero. Of course they did. And some of them, when Domitian at the end of the 1st century AD started doing the same thing, they thought, oh, it's Nero back from the dead. Here's Antichrist Part 2, the sequel. What we're being told is that this is a world ruler who is systematically persecuting, prosecuting, and executing Christians, and that is a very bad thing. Now, the author of Revelation, John of Patmos, believes that human history in the future is not going to be rather different from human history in his own day. He believes that probably human history is going to culminate with a really wicked ruler who looks a lot like Nero in his behavior towards Christians. This is a description of the character of the person. It's not naming the actual human name of the person. It's describing the character of that final wicked ruler of the world and saying, you better watch out because he's coming, Christians. You need to be prepared to be persecuted.
Believe me, this was a very common practice in the ancient world called Gematria. So here are some examples. Some graffiti on a wall in Pompeii reads, "I love the woman whose number is 545. So any passerby in Pompeii reading this graffiti wouldn't exactly know who it's referring to, but they would have definitely recognized the number as Gematria. Greek authors make reference to Gematria all the time. So for example, Strato of Sardis, who was a famous 2nd century Greek poet, proves to us in one of his epigrams that he knows what Gematria is and he has way too much time on his hands. Anus and gold have the same numerical value. I once discovered this while casually calculating. And he's right. The Greek word for anus and the Greek word for gold both have a value of 1,570. So Gematria by no means was a fringe practice. Everybody was doing it, whether you were scrawling the name of your crush on a wall, whether you were writing bathroom humor epigrams, or whether you were writing crazy mystical apocalypses. From very early on in Christian history, Nero is viewed as the arch-villain of Christianity. Early church historians like Eusebius and Roman historians like Suetonius both mention Nero violently persecuting Christians, burning them alive in Rome. Whoever wrote the book of Revelation had a vendetta against the Roman Empire and viewed Nero as one of the greatest evils on earth. We don't exactly know why. Some scholars think that the book was written shortly after the persecutions from Nero in Rome, which would make the book surprisingly early. Other people think that the book was written later in the 1st century under the reign of Domitian, but we don't know if that's true because there's no evidence of persecutions happening under the reign of Domitian. Either way, this does demonstrate that the tradition surrounding Nero dates back very early in Christian history. The connection between 666 and Nero is further strengthened by chapter 13, verse 3. One of the beast's heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. According to the Jewish mystical text, the Sibylline oracles, Nero is thought to be resurrected at the end of time to continue wreaking havoc on earth. So the book of Revelation might be tacitly referencing this tradition. After all, the author does seem to be deeply steeped in Jewish mysticism. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking this is a stretch or just a coincidence. You had to switch the Greek word into Hebrew letters. I'm not buying it. Fair enough, but 2 early manuscripts of the book Revelation all but seal it for me. These 2 manuscripts accidentally write 616 instead of 666. This isn't a simple matter of messing up a pen stroke. 616 also spells Nero in Hebrew Gematria, but only if you drop off the final N. Now, 616 is probably not the original reading. Most of our manuscripts say 666. Our earliest manuscript says 666, but this does show that there was an alternative reading circulating at the time, and that alternative reading also was a cipher for the name Nero. Why the switch? Well, one New Testament scholar, Bruce Metzger, theorizes that it's the switch from the Greek form of Nero's name to the Latin form of Nero's name, which doesn't have that final N. For example, note how his name lacks the N in these Latin coins minted during his reign.
But Nero is just one of many names that can add up to 666. Kim believes a later copy of the Book of Revelation, found in an archaeological dig in Egypt, confirms the beast is Nero.
One of the interesting things about these fragments is that we've got 2 different numbers.
What are those letters?
A chi is a 600, xi 60, sigma a 6, 666. This one over here we have a chi iota sigma 616 with a line over the top.
Why is it different?
You might think that this number destroys the possibility that it could be Nero.
Yes.
What's striking about this is that it may help to confirm the identity of Nero, because this would be the number that we would get if we spelled Nero according to the Latin spelling, Nero Kaiser.
Okay.
Without the N. The letter N represented 50, the number 50. So 666 minus 50
616.
616. So we've just
So we just
gone.
subtract, and we're going to come up with 616, and we have the same guy.
That's right.
I'm so clever.
The number 616 in this passage was known in antiquity and was discarded in the 2nd century. Irenaeus, the patristic commentator, wrote a chapter on the number of the beast, arguing that in the better manuscripts of Revelation that he had seen, the number was 666 instead of 616. The fact that he was writing in the 2nd century tells us that both numbers existed at that time. Irenaeus was a well-known and influential Christian writer. It may well have been his input that caused scribes to alter the text to 666 if 616 had been in the master copy that they used. Indeed, we know of one other manuscript, Codex C, from the 5th century that has 616, and 2 others that used to exist, manuscripts 5 and 11, that also had this number. Codex C, also known as Ephraemi Rescriptus, is probably the 2nd most important manuscript for the book of Revelation still in existence. Nevertheless, this is P115 and Codex C against the world. The point I wish to make is that on the one hand, one cannot simply appeal to the earliest manuscripts and assume that the case is settled. Textual criticism is not done in such a simplistic manner. Date is indeed important, but there are several other factors involved. On the other hand, one needs to weigh the manuscripts rather than count them. How important are they overall? Do they contain a good text, or are they full of mistakes and even deliberate alterations? Neither the earliest manuscripts by themselves, nor the most manuscripts by themselves are sufficient evidence for settling a text-critical problem. If further research shows 616 to most likely be the number of the beast, it will certainly have interesting implications. In the least, it will send tons of popular Christian literature to the flames.
Now, what started as a secret code for Nero's name has exploded into all kinds of conspiracy theories and predictions of the future. One of the more common theories is that RFID chip implants will be a harbinger of the apocalypse.
And we're going to be talking about the 666, the microchip.
Book of Revelation says of that time that no man will be able to buy or sell unless they received the mark of the beast.
Now, as interesting as it might be to study some of these YouTube prophets and their conspiracy theories, one thing that they generally have in common is that they brush aside the historical context of the book of Revelation, using the text as a guidebook to tell the future rather than taking it seriously as a text from a specific historical moment in the late 1st century.
One of the things about the book of Revelation that makes it so actually incompatible with the dispensational interpretation of all this is that the author of Revelation is going to say to us, be prepared to go through the tribulation. Be prepared to be persecuted and even executed. Revelation is the book of the martyrs. It even uses the Greek verb nikao, which means to conquer or to overcome, to refer to being faithful unto death and into death to the faith of Jesus Christ. It's the book of the martyrs. So, Mr. 666, one more time. Who is he? He's a world ruler that's bad to the bone, wicked through and through, and looks a lot like the behavior of Nero or the character of Nero. And what we know about him is he's going down for the count once and for all when the rider on the white horse, Jesus, comes back. 666,